Hello, and welcome to this Hunter Strategy brown bag session on quality assurance, which I like to call QA 101, which gives some basic introductions to some important concepts about quality in software development. My name is Jay Newlin, and I'm the Director of Quality Assurance here at Hunter. As you can see, I have over 20 years of experience in software development, both as a power user and also directly in software development as an implementer, project manager, trainer, and a number of different roles. And for the last 10 years, I've been working specifically in quality assurance and engineering management. I'm glad to be able to share this time with you and introduce you to quality assurance. So, there's really no better way to have a conversation about quality assurance than to start with a basic definition. And the basic definition that I love to use about quality comes from quality management, quality control guru who did a lot of his work in automotive technology, automotive manufacturing in the middle of the 20th century. Joseph Juran was born and raised in Hungary, came to the States, and quickly joined folks like Showart and Deming to really advance quality management, particularly because automotive was such a large industry that was looking to consistency and high quality in their products. Stuck very much with automotive, and from automotive manufacturing, most of those principles are now being spread throughout almost all manufacturing, and all the principles and concepts have found their way into quality assurance in software development as well. So Duran, in a handbook in the mid 1950s, defined quality as fitness for use. Sounds fairly straightforward, but I actually think that it's something that deserves to be unpacked. I know if you read my blog, you've heard some of this language before, but we have an opportunity to kind of dig into my thinking of why and how Duran's language fits so well for software development. So at heart, Duran said that fitness is all about meeting the requirements. And those requirements are things that we could specify in some form of definition of what the product should do, how it should look, measurements if it's a physical object, characteristics that we're expecting a website to have. We all know we need a particular type of field ready to accept text input if we're inputting a username somewhere. There are rules that we can talk about around what is a password that's going to be acceptable for our website. Is it going to be a minimum of 6 characters, min of 8 characters, min of 12 characters? Do we want special characters, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? Those are all types of requirement statements or specifications that we can talk about. And so fitness in this case talks about meeting those requirements. And for those of us who are software testers, we're actually going to want to write or want to see very specific tests that test each one of these requirements. So those who are in quality in manufacturing are going to have calipers, and they're going to measure the thing that's being produced very, very, very carefully to make sure that it is the correct size and shape, and it has the correct angles to it, and so forth and so on. In software development, we do the exact same thing. We are checking to make sure that the software or the section of the software is doing what we have said it's supposed to do. We verify everything very, very carefully, or at least as much as time permits. And we try to use all sorts of tools to enable us to do this. We'll get into that a little bit later with what does a tester do. Duran didn't stop, though, with just fitness. A lot of definitions up until that point of quality actually stopped with fitness, talking about how well a product met the requirements that could be written down. But Duran said, really, to talk about true quality, we need to bring the customer or the end user into the picture as well. And we need to make sure that it's not just fit, but it's also fit for use. And this is huge in software development because we all know that software rarely exists just for other software, other than things like APIs and some backends that the general average user never touches. Almost all software is produced for some human being to interact with. And so that's also why I kind of glom on to this definition of quality fitness for use, making sure we remember our end users. And when we're talking about what a user will want or need, we actually validate against a very different standard. Things may not be written down. A user has some expectations. They bring those from their use of other software that's very similar to ours. So we're going to want things to behave specific ways. Once we've introduced them to a pattern, they expect us to maintain that pattern throughout our system. So if you find yourself, and I can't tell you how many times I've been in various places in Microsoft Office where something works one way, let's say in Excel, and works somewhat differently in Word. And it drives me crazy as an end user of their product that their two teams for two of their biggest products can't get together and go, oh, yeah, that's right. We do this thing ever so slightly differently between two of our flagship products. But I won't pick on them too much. It's something that is very true of all of us as we're developing software. Every once in a while, we're going to, if you will, make a bit of a mistake, and we're not going to do things in a consistent way. That's really important for us to remember. The customer is expecting that. The other thing that customers have beyond their general expectations is there are some things that I like to call some general standards that are not necessarily able to be written down in specifications or requirements. They're going to be unusual things, but they're kind of like paradigms that we've all become accustomed to. For example, if I am on a login page, one of the best examples I can always give everybody on testing and software development is a login page, because eventually all of us touch one practically every day of our lives. And on a login page, there's going to be something as simple as username input, password input, some kind of submit button. And if we're really being nice to the user, we're going to make sure there's some kind of flow there for the user who has forgotten their username or forgotten their password. Well, there's no rule book that says we have to do it exactly that way. But think how weird it would feel for you if we put the password field on top and the username field below that. Again, no rule of the universe is broken by doing it that way, but every user is going to trip up and really react strongly if we do something like that. That would be breaking a paradigm that is just generally in use and practically at this point universally true for software that requires a user to log in. So ultimately, the question around fitness for use is, will the end user want to use this software? We can have some of the tightest controls around, hey, we know that we have all these calculations correct. We know that we are doing all the things right as far as all the business rules are concerned. But if we hand our product to an end user, they may balk at the fact that the screen is really ugly or it's not organized in a way that makes good sense to them. That did not really pass our quality checks because it is not fit for use. Back in the 1990s, when I was introducing people to our software system that's ERP for the paper packaging industry, I would often encounter users who would say, I don't understand this. And I suddenly realized that what they were telling me was that our screens, now this is way back in the days of green screens and just text on the screen, our screens were not always organized in a way that made sense to the end user. And so I began to become more and more sensitive to how the user used software and making sure that as I was thinking about what was good quality software, what was ready for the user, had to take their approach into account. So the next part of the conversation is who is a tester? I've said that it's something that I like to do. It's part of what Shanti and Sunita and I do on a day-to-day basis in our careers, testing software. So who is a tester? And here I look to a quality assurance software testing guru by the name of Michael Bolton. And no, he's not either one of the well-known Michael Boltons. This is a guy that has been writing about software testing for the better part of 10 or 15 years now, particularly since the Agile Manifesto and taking on a role of being a strong tester in the Agile world. And Bolton talks about testers needing to have a certain type of skills that and a brain mindset that allows us to explore and experiment constantly, to think about problems that might be really, really weird or subtle or that are emergent. That is, they're going to happen because I'm following a particular process. And after doing a process a specific way, I can make a bug happen. And those of us that like to do this constantly keep the entire system in mind, as well as then also having very, very specific goals, exactly how to use the software, exactly what the user wants or expects out of the software. And frankly, to really enjoy finding problems in software. If that is something that is appealing to a person, they really ought to consider QA as a possibility for themselves as career path, or figuring out a way to use those skills to benefit the products that they use regularly. I joke all the time that there's probably no better feeling, in spite of the fact that I like to teach people. I love managing, I love interacting with people, I love working with customers, even with customers that are saying, this is just not working well for me. I love digging into what's giving them problems. But frankly, for me, there's almost no better feeling than writing a bug ticket and then ushering that bug ticket through to completion and being able to show that the bug ticket that I identified or that I worked with an end user to write up is fixed in a release of software. It's just some of the best things that happen in my career. So who is a tester? Frankly, we're always someone who is willing to be the user advocate. I've already said that I believe that true quality is not just fitness and meeting requirements, but also fit for our end users. I love to ding my Macy's credit card website all the time. They fortunately allow me to do this by not making a change to their system, but theirs is one of the few websites where the sign out button link is at the top left of the screen. Frankly, just about every other site that I go to, the logout functionality, user profile functionality is almost always in the top right. If I were the quality manager at Macy's or whoever it is that manages their software and their website, I would probably have written a bug ticket long, long ago I actually don't ask them to do that for me because I love to pick on them and their sign out. Because as a user advocate, I would say that's a weird place for that sign out button to be. I already said in quoting Bolton that testers always keep in mind both the minute details. We know practically every rule about every field and every page in the software systems that we work with regularly. And at the same time, we're keeping the entire big picture in mind. Now, I'll grant that's also true of the folks that are in design, product management, project management. We're all sharing that same mindset, keeping a lot of tiny little details and big pictures going in mind at the same time. But it's important for us to remember that somewhere between those minute details, the big picture as a whole, how the system is expected to function, and how the user is going to use it, that at that intersection, if that were a Venn diagram where all those circles would meet, is probably the place where we're going to actually find the person who is a really, really good tester, person who has the right mindset for being a tester. And I also like to say, in a lot of ways, we're the last player in the telephone game. The business analysts, the product management folks have written up a whole bunch of requirements, handed them off in more waterfall practice. They hand those off to design team who spend a lot of time on the development of the look and feel of the product, how the product ought to work. Developers bring requirements and designs into play. They create the thing, and then we hand it off to those of us in QA. And in some regards, like being the last player in the telephone game, it's our job to say, okay, this is what I heard and saw when I used the software. Sometimes we say it's exactly what everybody said it was going to be. And then along the line, we're probably going to have, just like the old telephone game, some kind of miscommunication, miss in the process somewhere. And we're going to be able to talk about the fact that either a defect or a bug was introduced somewhere in that process. And we're the voice of that last player in the telephone game. And frankly, I don't ever like to limit software testing to those of us who choose it as a profession. Frankly, anyone who cares about the quality of software that you're using, you can be and you are a tester for your software. I can't tell you this point the number of times from literally 1983 sometime, a bug in DOS that I sent a report into Microsoft Corporation, all the way through, not that long ago, writing up a bug for software that my team and I were testing. I have written bugs for a long, long time as a user, just like I do as a quality assurance professional. Anyone who cares really should take the time to contact the provider, the writer, the developer of software that they use all the time. I have literally what I would consider some really good collegial professional relationships with software developers of apps that are on my phone. But I've written up some bug reports for them because something happens and they really like to have me participate in their process almost as if I were part of their team. A couple of them are actually, single developer shops where I get to know the person that has written the software. And frankly, as a result, I'm often invited into alpha and beta testing simply because I do have this knack for finding things and writing up a bug ticket that they're able to use to improve their software. So testing, according to, yes, the very same Michael Bolton, is really being all about learning about the current status of the product, good, bad, or indifferent. We're all about dispelling illusions. We're probably always the first to say software is never perfect, but it's our job to help move it on toward that goal. And when we're doing our best, it's our goal as quality assurance professionals to figure out ways that we can find, in particular, the big showstopper bugs so that customers are not the ones that find them. So that when we're putting something into production, we're making sure that the user is not going to trip up on something that to us is small, but to them is huge because it's stopping them from doing their job. Like Bolton says, sometimes that can feel like a socially difficult role because most of us don't want to think about problems, don't like to spend a lot of time on errors and bugs. And most of us in quality assurance don't mind sitting in that space and helping to make things better as a result. So to kind of bring this to a point of where it becomes practical and helping everyone that may not know what it is that those of us that are in QA do on a day-to-day basis, I have some simple examples for us. So it's easier for me to start with what a tester doesn't do because sometimes some people act like this is what they believe we do. Some people seem to think that we just kind of pound around on the keys, and by pounding around on the keys, we're able to make bad things happen. Or that what we actually do is we just kind of click around our mouse randomly. I'll actually admit this is not a bad thing for a tester to do, but we should not be doing this daily. And it's not how we find bugs. I mean, it is. I'm going to find bugs if I just simply try to move around in a somewhat random way. And the reason I know that is I've done it many times. I remember really well as we were transferring our ERP system from COBOL on Unix platform over to a Windows-based solution, a screen was laid out very, very, very vertically, top to bottom. And I was filling in information on that screen like a user would. There was something about the box specification that I normally wouldn't have at hand. So I filled out the top section and the bottom section, then went back and filled in the middle section, and the entire system crashed as a result of not filling in that screen in the exact sequence that the developer had expected. But really, no, these are not the things that we do all the time. So what do we do? Well, sometimes we're actually going to follow a script of some form. Some of us call these test cases. Some folks will just call these tests. For some of us, and I tend to be more like this than not, it's some version of a script that is stuck in my head. These days, I don't need to write myself a test script to tell me how to test a login page. It's some, like I said, it's so universal. I know the things that I'm going to do. But if I were to write some version, and this is a silly version, but it gives some good indication of what we might do in testing, I'm going to write these types of steps down, and I'm going to want to test them in this way. Change the username to, instead of using only letters, throw an emoji in there somewhere. Try to change the email address to something that we know is not a valid email address. These are things that I'm going to do in a login or in a user profile page, whatever this page might be. Some things are allowed, some things are not allowed. So some kind of script. If we're able to write up a script, sometimes it limits our vision. And what I mean by that is if we follow the steps of our scripts and we try to affirm that, yes, this is high quality software with few or no bugs that we could find, I'm going to bet money that we're wrong because we're not using the system like a user would use it. I just mentioned using a very stacked screen, top to bottom expectation on the part of the developer. I used it like a user and I uncovered a bug that the developer didn't even know existed because they were expecting me to fill in that information a particular way. I don't like to pick on other testers, but I also had one really specific example. Almost literally, a tester was following a script that someone had written, and the screen was blinking something in red. Yes, error message, literally blinking in red. But because they were able to step successfully through the steps of that test, they marked the test as passed. And it took us almost 12 hours to figure out that there was a major problem that the system had literally been trying to show that tester. So we need to try to use the system, explore the system like a user. I actually have a blog post coming up fairly soon all about one of my favorite types of testing called exploratory testing. And this is a sort of example of how to set one's mind like a user. Now I'll be kind to Macy's. We know we want to release the Black Friday sale web pages. So I'm going to want a tester to sit down and act like they are the parent of three kids, ages 3, 8, and 15. And during their lunch break, they're going to spend about 20 minutes trying to place two items for each child in the shopping cart that don't exceed a credit card limit of $300. Nowhere in here do I say exactly which products to choose. I don't say that you need to start anywhere. Obviously, give a goal for the user, getting those things into the shopping cart. But I know along the way, they're going to do things such as they're going to see our product display page. They're probably going to do some kind of search. They're going to click on an item and from that item, click, send a shopping cart or put in my shopping bag, whatever Macy's happens to call it this week. This is exploring like a user, freeing the tester's brain from a set of scripts and saying, be a user for a little bit, see what might happen. The statistics are really, really good for exploratory testing. More bugs are found in exploratory testing than are found by any type of scripted testing or any kind of automation. And this has been proven over and over again in all sorts of reviews of software development practice and testing processes. And so you will hear me talk, and I'm sure both Shanti and Sunita talk about it just the same. We don't know each other all that well yet. It's only been a couple months so far. But I'll bet you will find that all of us talk about, no, you need to give me some time just to sit with the system and try to use it like a user would use it, because I know that's how I'm going to find way more bugs than simply asserting that all my tests pass. If we're able to write a script, we're in 2023. The good news is there are all sorts of testing tools out there. This happens to be an example of a Java test. Very, very simple calculation testing, but there are all sorts of frameworks and products and programs that are available to us to actually automate a lot of things that can be scripted. If I, as a human being, can define, enter this information, expect this type of message to appear, then click that button and expect this thing to happen next, there's pretty good chance that at least 90%, and I'll bet given where we are in test tooling, somewhere even approaching 98, 99, and in a lot of places, almost 100% of such scripted tests can be handed over to automation frameworks. We let the robots handle the rote stuff. Once we've identified the script, we can let the robots follow that script many, many times. And they're way faster and they don't bore those of us that are human beings that are trying to do, login testing for the 393rd time today. So what does a tester really do? A tester works to affirm that the software, the website, the app, whatever it may be, is fit for use. That's really the ultimate goal. We use all these tools, scripts and automation and manual testing through exploration. We do them all in order to affirm that not only does it meet the requirements, but that end users are really going to want to use our software. Dropping back to one of the most interesting computer scientists of the last century, Edgar Dijkstra, he had a great quote that you'll see on signatures of mine. You probably noticed that it was even in my bio page on this presentation. Testing can prove the presence of bugs, not their absence. I'll never assert, at least anywhere in this career of mine, into its foreseeable future, I'll never assert that we can create bug-free software. Frankly, there's going to be bugs in software whenever human beings are writing the software and whenever human beings are using the software. Bugs happen. I can't guarantee that I can find every one of them, but QA teams and I can work really, really hard to find a lot of the big bugs before they get out there and the end user touches the software.